Today I'm sitting down with founder of Festival Pass, Ed Vincent. How are you today, Ed?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not bad myself, considering everything that's going on. I think Festival Pass is a cool idea, and from what I can gather, the goal is to get more people out there and enjoying a variety of events, not just musical events. Of course, with the recent coronavirus scare, events are basically on hold. How are tech companies responding in these strange and uncertain times?
Yeah, well, first, it's always interesting to launch a new company in a space when all the whole reason you launched it is for live events and none exist anymore for the moment. Um,
Is that what happened?
so it is an interesting kind of path, but
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur for many years, and the first thing is many great businesses were kind of built on the upswing after a recession, depression, or any other concept. So
So true.
we're in it for the long run. So specifically tech companies overall, there's a general benefit that we have is because as we're coming to market, we didn't already put a massive amount of overhead related to defined revenue. So for us, we're a subscription based business. So the great part about our model really is when people sign up for Festival Pass, they get credits that they can spend on live events. So those credits it's like a savings account. It stays in your bank. So if you're not using them to actually go to an event, you're saving them and you're accruing them until you do use them. So we fared a little better than some of the other live event companies themselves that lost months and months, if not almost a year's worth of revenue just from this crisis. And then when you ask specifically about tech companies, it's a broad kind of statement of what that means. But obviously, companies that are in industries greatly impacted by the COVID environment, such as travel and entertainment, et cetera, are having significant issues. I mean, you've probably seen, things like Airbnb, having
Oh,
just
yeah.
half of their revenue go away overnight, as well as, numerous other similar companies, Uber, Lyft.
Yeah, and so I guess basically for the reasons that you've already mentioned, it's unfortunate timing because of COVID. It's fortunate timing because a lot of the best businesses start in times of difficulty. So I'd imagine part of your efforts are right now would just be preparing for the return of live events, right?
Very, very much so. And what it's allowed us to do is build a pretty significant infrastructure to scale. Being a repeat entrepreneur, and participating in different companies where sometimes you're, how do you say, refueling the plane in midair. It's given us a little bit of time to ensure we have the right infrastructure for scale. And what I mean by that, it has a lot to do with data and tracking infrastructure. It has a lot to do with building up different feature sets within our environment that are not custom to specific reactionary outcomes, but more long-term strategic thinking so that it can scale across thousands of events.
Yeah, and this seems like kind of like the perfect time to just focus in on all those things. I mean, it's similar to what I've been doing in my business, just in terms of I launched a pre-order for my new Kindle recently, and that's my fifth book. But I'm also preparing and looking ahead and to the recovery of the economy and artists being able to get out there again, and gives me lots of time to work on my next books, my next companion courses, and think ahead to what they might want
Yeah,
coming out of this.
everybody knows that even though this is a very disheartening, very difficult time for all of us to go through. Excuse
Yeah,
me. It's live events will come back. I mean, it's not that
yeah,
it's not the industry isn't going away. It's a $200 billion industry globally. That we might have some disruption for 6 months, 9 months, and even 12 months for some big festivals or big arenas or big sporting events, but it will come back, just like it always does. So it's part of investing in a time where we're ready for it to come back. We're going to be on the front lines, benefiting as it does.
Of course, and there may be a little bit of a stigma coming out of this, but eventually people will just want that entertainment, I'm sure, and want to get out there again. And some people are already going, just let us go back to work. But
Yeah.
that for whatever reason, for various reasons, maybe unwise. I'm kind of trapped in Calgary, Alberta myself. I just came here with the intention of visiting friends and doing my taxes, because I'm effectively a digital nomad. So what you said about Airbnb, kind of like, I bristle at that, but it is what it is. And for the time being, I'm staying with friends in Calgary, and I've kept myself isolated, and I maybe go out shopping once a week, and
Mhm.
that's just the way things are at the moment.
Yes, yes, and I'm in New York City, so I'm seeing that on a daily basis. But what is nice, and and again, this talk about the outcomes of major instances or events, is I personally see people being nice to each other. I get out for walks every day out of my apartment in New York, down by the water, down by the parks, and people are respective and still staying socially distant, but um, they're friendly. Everybody's kind of in it together, and
Yeah.
I wonder if on the flip side of this, hopefully people have understood what's important to them and will be kinder to each other going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see that. I think it's an awesome time to reflect, and it's not something we always do or even want to do, but being forced into it kind of allows you to look things over and consider what direction you might want to take moving forward. So, although there's no way of any of us know exactly when the travel bans will be lifted and non-essential businesses will be allowed to operate and public gatherings allowed, what's your best guess for when things will go back to normal?
Yeah, so while I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict,
Of course.
you could imagine I'm on the phone daily with many people in the industry trying to figure out what's the next best path. So, while a lot of let me pause for a second, is the perspective changes a little bit based upon who you talk to, and that perspective is
Mm,
also related to the type of organization that's putting something on. And what's fascinating about live events and music events and all the above is while you have some of the big players that we all know of, the Live Nations of the world, Ticketmaster, AEGs of the world that run, very large festivals and concerts, there is a big part of this industry that are, I wouldn't call them mom and pops per se, but they may run five events or five festivals or 50 festivals, or even some community events that are only running one annual event per year, and it's their bread and butter. Like as an
hmm
example, you probably know Summerfest in Milwaukee, the biggest music concert in the world. Uh,
mm,
Music festival where 1 million people come every year. That's run by a nonprofit organization that was set up by the town. And they spend all year round building for this festival, and they have staff just for this one festival. So it's interesting to look at the type of organization running music-based events to really understand what their perception is on when it comes back. And so that's a long way of saying the answer I'm going to give you is defers. So I just got off the phone, about an hour ago to a group that usually runs about 50 or 60 festivals, a media company, and they're holding tight to this fall. So they want to start bringing things back in August and September and October, from events that they had to move from April, May, and June. Um, some others, as you know, from the bigger festivals out there, some just canceled their entire 2020 slate. Like
yeah.
Burning is not happening. There's a bunch of others that aren't going to happen. And I think everybody is also hoping positively that some of the events moved from April to November will happen, like Coachella or Ultra or a few others.
Absolutely. And we appreciate that response. Overall, it seems like there are some rosy predictions for the future of live events, of course, when they come back. But where do you see things going and what changes are coming?
Yeah, so it's a good point, right? So I think of when things happen in any kind of industry due to some unknown circumstances, there's always behavioral change, um, and there's a difference in how one reacts to that behavioral change for the short term, more of a reactionary business pivot versus kind of a longer sustained change in people's behaviors. So when I think about that in any capacity related to entertainment, that could be in terms of TV, movies, or anything else, versus music and live events, each one has kind of a way to look at what is happening short term. What will people go back to the way it was beforehand, or will it be a long-standing future change? So when you think of you know
Hmm.
filmed entertainment or movies, or movie theaters are not going away, but there may be some shift where studios for a long time held to the fact that there was always a window for theatrical release that would happen long before it ever makes it to any kind of digital streaming or anything else, um, because of the fact that they were forced to push some titles out there early, and still charge that $20 on Amazon Prime or some other platform. Um, that may be a long lasting change. They may have
Hmm.
decided that we never wanted to mess with our theatrical revenue, but maybe now we've tested it and people are willing to pay $20 while sitting at home for a first run movie. So I think that will create some change. The other is on the music side, um, the virtual festivals, virtual entertainment. Um, we've probably seen a lot, or I know we've seen a lot in the last month of artists live streaming on Facebook or live streaming on Instagram or Twitch, and then a few kind of televised from your living room concerts. So it's an interesting perspective to take a look and say, well, hey, that's a lot of fun right now because we're all at home, and that's a reactionary approach to, hey, there's really nothing else we can do, so let's at least
Yeah.
entertain people at home, and that's great for engagement. It's great for maintaining a fan base, but for the vast majority of artists, for 80% of artists, there's no revenue there. They're basically
Yeah.
just trying to help and engage their fans because there's really no infrastructure in place to make that a sustainable, ongoing, revenue producing event. So therefore, what we're doing at Festival Pass is we're not changing how we see live streaming within our platform. We've just kind of moved it up on the docket from something that was on the product roadmap for the future, has now become a little more of a priority. But our position is not to replace live streaming on Facebook, Instagram, or on Twitch or anywhere else. It's actually to add a complementary business model for future live events, so that the one time a year you might go to, let's say, the Taste the Country Music Festival in Buffalo, New York, which usually gets 50,000 people, they can now have an infrastructure on Festival Pass to maybe do 3 or 4 or 5 mini virtual events leading up to their main event. So it wouldn't replace the live event, but it would just be complementary to it and give them
Hmm.
other sources of revenue throughout the year and other ways to engage their audience and their sponsors.
Yeah, I love your point. It sounds like it's basically a mix of cautious optimism and experimenting with new models, which I think many of us are having to think about. Artists are certainly having to look at that. And of course, live streaming has become increasingly a popular way of connecting and just video content in general. But yeah, it's all a matter of adapting and seeing the opportunity where it is, for sure. Practically every independent musician would love to see more people at their shows. And as someone who has started communities and launched events, I've seen just how tough it can be to get butts in seats. So when we do get events back, what are some things musicians and event organizers could do to drive more interest in their gigs and events?
So, of course, the first thing is to list them on festivalpass.com. But yeah, so I totally empathize and appreciate that kind of world. And one of the reasons we exist is to provide a more seamless approach for audiences to engage. And our tagline is "Live Life Live." So anything and everything we do is about getting people to be more active in their communities, and and nationally and internationally, to really just get out and really savor and experience what live entertainment is. So along those lines, the more and more people are, even in more independent or smaller venues, having events, tapping into uh, networks like ours enables them to find an audience, enables them to list something to an audience that may or may not previously have discovered it. So I come from a pretty significant data background in consumer entertainment. So about 5 years prior to Festival Pass, um, I had a company that still exists today that I'm an advisor to that spent a lot of time helping the consumer data strategies for big television networks like A&E networks and AMC networks, and spent some time as a interim chief data officer for a company called MoviePass, which some people know in the U.S. as like a meteoric rise and fall of a subscription company. But along those lines, what is very compelling and interesting is I learned that what's important, and Netflix at least does it. Some people say does it well, some people say doesn't, but creates discovery, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're in an environment where there's thousands of options to choose from, and to get to know the consumer better, like in the Netflix world, the more and more movies you watch, it defines what's presented when you log in. There's no way to log into Netflix and see all 10,000 titles right in front of you on the screen. It has to be some discovery mechanism and recommendations of what you may like. In music, you see that with Spotify and many others. But
Yeah.
for us, it's we're taking the same approach in live events, right? So
Mm.
the more and more and the thousands of events that are on our platform, when a consumer is a subscriber or a member of ours, everything they do in our environment, every kind of festival page they go look at and watch a video or click I'm interested in, or every time they actually attend an event, we're collecting that data, mostly just to be able to surface other opportunities that are interesting to them.
The algorithmic discovery has definitely come a long way, and I've certainly discovered some music that I like that way on Spotify and so forth. The interesting part is that we increasingly live in a world where, iPad users use PC computers and country music listeners love classical and so forth. And there's just no stigma attached to it like maybe there used to be in generations past. You're kind of allowed to like what you like. But if people can get recommendations for kind of all their interests, then not only are they going to be happy and satisfied, they're definitely going to get out more and engage with this content more. So as we kind of explored before we started recording with the New Music Industry podcast, one of the key themes is what's new, what's going on, how things are changing, which I think we've been able to cover here a little bit. Another important theme, though, is that the listeners are made up of people who are forward-thinking and entrepreneurial-minded, including myself, and we're all looking for ways to marry music with business to produce expanded results. So, and from what I know about you, you're a serial entrepreneur with experience in a variety of fields, so I'd love to ask a few questions about that.
Of course.
What is the greatest failure you've overcome as an entrepreneur?
I guess a couple things. I mean, this is a perfect example of what we're living in right now in terms of world events outside of your control.
Hmm.
So, because I'm old enough to have remembered, I lived through a couple big events that had significant impacts against my entrepreneurial endeavors. So, I lived through the dot-com bubble bust,
Yeah.
where I had a e-commerce company that I sold. I thought I was rich. I was 25 years old and sold it to a company right around the time of the bust, and it was worth millions on paper because I got stock in the company that acquired us. But soon thereafter, 9/11 happened and basically um, turned that multi-million-dollar paper value into basically nothing. So that's one of those rise and fall of emotions, right? So you learn a little bit along the way that sometimes if you sell a company, take some cash instead of stock. That's one, and then I also experienced another similar um, impact during the 2008 recession. That
Mm.
time around, I ran an agency of about 70 people. It was an experiential marketing agency. And that's where I kind of got my love of events. We we helped launch a bunch of film festivals, and we activated a lot of brands at events everywhere. And it was a really fun, really great time. But then, when 2007, 2008 came to be, a lot of big brands that were really funding our business started pulling back because of the Great Recession. So that was tough. It was tough to, have to lay off people and go through that process that, a lot of
Hmm.
businesses are going through right now.
Yeah, those were tumultuous times to be sure. And I guess if there's anything we can sort of decipher from history, is that something else will always come along. I don't think it's any reason to live in fear as many do, but at the same time, it's important to be able to adapt as needed as things come along. The only thing I can compare, and most people say, I've never experienced anything like this in history, which, as far as I know, there hasn't been this mass scale of lockdown. But the only thing I can compare it to is living through the Great Hanshin earthquake in Japan in '95,
Oh, wow.
and we lived up in the mountains, and the water wasn't working for probably a good 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We went to the springs and managed to bring some water back to our homes and boil it and use it. It was very, very different and strange times, and mostly we stayed inside too. So, and then, what is the greatest victory you've experienced as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, again, I don't know how to totally crystallize that, except for as an entrepreneur, some of the greatest victory is just that when you have an idea, actually seeing it come to fruition. And I think that's what makes entrepreneurs that are repeat entrepreneurs just keep doing it. Um,
Mm,
of course, there's financial incentive to do stuff, but most of it comes from having an idea, thinking you can make a change, and thinking you can create something that hasn't been created before, and then spending the year to ideate and get it to product, and then getting it launched and seeing your little baby grow. So I don't know if that's a good answer in terms of a specific victory. I've seen it in multiple companies that I've built where, you know, when you start seeing something you built elsewhere. So even with Festival Pass, I get excited when, we had a large media company invest in us and provide us with, a bunch of media. And even right now, we've been holding back on some of that media spend because of COVID.
yeah.
But of course, we've already messaged out all the creative and what it looks like and how the world's going to continue to see how we represent ourselves. And that excites me when I know that millions of consumers are going to be you know touching and feeling something that was just really an idea a year ago.
Yeah, maybe you would agree, but I think in large part the joy is in the process. And, the whole thing about arriving or arrival fallacy, trying to get somewhere in your business is almost just, when you think of it as like a means to an end, it's not that much fun. But when you are engaged in something that actively makes you excited, it's like the joy in the process.
Yeah, I agree. It's like watching a kid grow up.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And are there any books that have helped you on your journey?
Oh, many, many.
Mm,
One from just a pure tactical standpoint in running a business is OKRs. So it's a book from John Doerr, who's a venture capitalist. It's Objectives and Key Results. So if anybody's ever trying to kind of lay out what are quarterly and annual goals and how do you get the company kind of surrounded around one path and one vision, that's a great book.
mm,
Um, when it comes down to as an entrepreneur, I've been lucky enough. I'm part of a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization, and
mm.
globally there's about 14,000 of us, and it's a pretty tight organization. And through it, I've been lucky enough to attend a lot of different educational programs, including a 3-year program at MIT. And through it, we get so many authors come in and kind of teach us for 4 or 6 hours. And there's just been some tremendous insights from that. And I just share that in the sense that there's a ton of books that are written from the outside that we've been lucky enough as a group to kind of hear the person speak face to face, whether that's Simon Sinek, Finding Your Why, whether that's
Hmm.
Malcolm Gladwell, with all of his tipping point books, or numerous other marketing books that have been fantastic.
Yeah, and just so our listeners know, there are certain qualifications to getting into organizations like that, right?
There are specifically. there's a lot of organizations out there that don't necessarily have a barrier to that. Um, EO itself, there's a couple of things. You just have to have a specific revenue in your company. So for
Yeah.
EO, you have to have a company that has at least $1 million worth of revenue. Uh,
Hmm.
and then, there's a few other things that it's more of a peer group. So you have to be able to, it's not a networking organization. It's about a peer learning thing.
And fortunately, there's still options for people who don't qualify. Things like mastermind groups or even online coaching is available to many of us. So there's still different ways to get connected on that journey to earning those revenue figures.
I agree. I agree. And what's nice about it, it's the structure of it that's helpful. It's really about, peer support, peer
Mm,
learning. Anybody that's makes a journey in life, a choice to continuously learn, and, seeks out other individuals that are on that same journey, there's plenty of places to find that support.
well, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time and generosity, Ed. Is there anything else I should have asked?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know this is a music-driven podcast, so we're excited to be helping change the way people experience, all sorts of live events, including music and film and food and wine. And part of it is really just to, embrace new changes and new ideas and new cultures.
Yeah.
And for us, it's, we just want to have the most seamless ability for individuals to consume and participate in live events, without ticketing fees, without a transactional environment that doesn't allow them to engage socially with the people they're going to the event to build a community with.
Mm. Well, we certainly look forward to seeing the idea expand and hopefully live events go back to what they were. I'm sure they will. And also the multitude of different ways that people might be able to engage with him coming out of the scare that we're in. So thank you so much.
Of course, of course.
Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.